Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
And Ginny, I think I'm going to be a psychologist today.
Oh, you are? Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall I tell you all my problems?
Oh, I figured that Olivia Benson would actually
Yeah,
share.
Olivia Benson's having a rough morning. It was Addie's birthday on Friday, and there are balloons downstairs, and she's scared of them. She's having a rough day.
So, listeners, if you hear a dog bark in the middle of this, she just wants to be part of the show, which is natural. I imagine lots of people, in fact, based on my inbox, lots of people do want to be part of this show. Most of them having absolutely nothing to do with the business of agencies.
Yes.
Most of them being just awful podcast guest
My
pitches.
my favorite ones are always the ones that say, "I'm a big fan. I listen all the time," and I'm like, "No, you don't.
No,
You don't.
because you wouldn't be pitching this part. You wouldn't be pitching anybody because you would know you've never had a guest ever in 7 years.
Ever."
Like, we don't do guest interviews. Don't bother trying.
Right. Yes.
But we've been on that rant before, so I suppose we probably don't need to go on it again. But, if you happen to be listening, then don't pitch a guest for this show.
Don't pitch, yes.
But most of the people who are pitching don't listen, so that doesn't really help.
Even though they say they do.
At all. And I really do appreciate the ones where they then become almost abusive in the follow-up emails.
Because you haven't responded.
Never heard back from you.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and you're not gonna.
Yep.
Because if you're not polite enough to actually tell me the truth or make a good pitch, I feel no obligation to respond.
Right. I got one yesterday that had a meme that said, "Are you ghosting me?" And I was like, "Yes, I am ghosting you because you didn't the same thing. We don't have guests. I'm not going to respond to you."
Yeah, I did respond once though to someone, and it was a very blunt email, but I was actually friendly with that agency's owner that they were pitching, and that owner had been a guest on one of my shows that does have guests in the past, so it was a poorly targeted pitch for so many reasons.
Yes.
And so I responded to that individual and said, "Look, I'm not going to tell my friend the owner about this, but you might want to hone your targeting a little bit because this is not a good look. It's a really bad look."
Yeah, it's a really bad look. Yeah.
So anyway, but that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the psychology of pricing as an agency because we've talked about pricing before and how to do it well and how to make sure that you're doing it profitably and all those kinds of things. But I think it would be interesting to take a look at it from basically the perspective of someone who is looking at or hearing your pricing as an agency and what signs that sends to them. How do you present your pricing in such a way to have an impact and get the right feelings, if you will, from your prospects. So I'm just going to throw the floor open there and see where you would like to start on this topic.
Oh, where I would like to start.
Yes.
Well, I actually just did a podcast interview on this topic a couple of weeks ago, and it was mostly aimed at women business owners and women, in their careers as they're looking for promotions and raises and things like that, because women tend to not negotiate, not ask for what we're worth. We don't, I work with a lot of women agency owners and they never price themselves correctly. They do this thing that I call negotiating against themselves, where they say, "Oh, but the client will never pay for that." How do you know that? You don't know that, right? Why are you negotiating against yourself? So I think that, as a woman, I see something a little bit different, see it through a different lens than I think others do, because that is for sure what happens. And I told this story in the podcast interview I did a couple of weeks ago, but in all the time that I've been hiring for my own business, men always negotiate their starting salary. Men always ask for promotion and raises, always. Women never do. And it's gotten to the point where I will make an offer to a woman and actually say, "I need you to negotiate this," because I want to know that they can do it, because they're going to be working with clients, right? So I have to know that they can negotiate with clients. But B, I want to give them the skills that they need to be able to do it. And what better way to do it than with their own salary? But I still have to say to them, "I'm going to make this offer and I need you to negotiate it so that I understand whether or not you can actually do it." Otherwise, every single woman I've ever hired would be like, "Yeah, this is great."
Yeah,
Ah!
I guess when it comes to pricing, there's the psychology on the prospect or client side, but then there's also the psychology on the owner's side.
Yeah.
And part of that is what you're getting at there. And I think that it is certainly, in my experience as well, it is more pronounced with women, although it certainly does exist with many men as well. And so you need to think about. Well, first of all, you need to start by being confident in your pricing, right?
Correct.
Just,
Yes.
I mean, at a minimum, stop negotiating against yourself,
Yep.
because that happens far too often.
Yep.
And it doesn't make any sense to me to do that, particularly when it's simply lowering your price for the exact same thing.
Right.
And we've talked about
Right.
how you
Right.
give discounts or reduce
Yes.
pricing in
Yes.
the past. But certainly when you're negotiating with yourself, don't just lower the price on the exact same thing. If you're absolutely convinced, and you might be right, that a prospect doesn't have a certain budget, you can give them an option at a lower price, but for God's sakes, make it less than what you planned on doing originally
Right.
for the higher price.
Yes.
Now, I do think from a psychological standpoint, there is this concept of premium pricing that can be effective for agencies. At some point, if you are not charging enough, people don't value what you're doing.
For sure.
This is and so I think that it can be helpful for you, in fact, to have higher prices in order to close business. Now, there is a fine line here, and I do see some people who take this to an extreme. It's sort of like, the whole notion of value
So do I.
pricing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know which widget to turn and when,
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah.
and so I do see some people who say, well, an hour of my time, it's going to cost you $1,500 or something like that. And that's just bonkers. Right. There is a point where you go too far in that direction, in my view. And so you still have to make sure that what you're doing really does provide the value for that money, because otherwise you may get some people who say, oh, yeah, they're premium price. They actually know what they're doing. But then there's going to be a lot of people who feel the other way. Like, this guy's he's a nut job. There's no way it can actually cost that much.
No.
But more often than not, if you're listening to this, chances are you can charge more than you currently charge. We say it all the time, but the psychology of that is that at some point when that price is high enough, people are like, oh, this is a premium service. And so you need to think about how you want to position yourself, because you do send a message with that pricing before they even know anything about your work.
Yep.
What kind of
Yep.
agency you are.
Yep. Yeah, I have a really good girlfriend who runs an agency, and she says to me all the time, and I've been working her through this, but she wants to work with higher paying clients, right? We all do. But the work that she does, she's convinced herself that no one will pay more than $3,000 a month, which just isn't true. And when you look at her website, she presents a very boutique, like small business, micro business type of work. And so I've said to her a couple of things. First of all, stop negotiating against yourself. People will pay more than $3,000 a month. Trust me. And secondly, let's revise your website copy so that it demonstrates the work that you can do at a larger business, maybe not at the enterprise level, but at mid-sized business level. So let's start elevating that. And as soon as she started, she did a couple of things. First of all, she revised her website copy, which has been great. She figured out exactly how much things cost, which we've talked about ad nauseum here, but you have to know, and part of that is in the confidence that will build that confidence. If you know exactly how much something costs, it will build your confidence to say, well, this is just how much it costs. And you add in your profit margin. Like, that's just how much things cost. If they want a strategic plan and it's going to take you 20 hours and you charge $300 an hour, you know how much that costs, right? So you have to know that. And then lastly, if you've got your profit margin set in there and you're doing things at a premium. Like, I have one really good girlfriend who will say, for tactical work, like showing up for client meetings and, doing administrative kinds of things from the meeting minutes and agendas and all that, I charge this rate. But if you're wanting me to do strategic thinking or strategic work, I charge this rate per hour. So she has sort of a range based on what the work is. So you have to sort of know those things, and you can add in your premium pricing too. But one of the tests that I always do is I will say, okay, this is how much it costs. Because you're having us do something on the peso model, for instance, implementation that literally no one else in the world can do, we're going to add premium pricing on top of it. And then I will say to the prospect, this is how much it costs. If they don't blink, I know I'm not charging enough.
Right.
Like, that's a test I do. And sometimes I win and sometimes I lose. More often than not, I win. But I know that if they are like, okay, then I'm not charging enough.
Yeah. And studying the reactions of people as they hear your pricing,
Yep.
it's a great way to use psychology basically as a research tool
Yep.
going forward, because different people will take different messages from the exact same pricing, right? So let's say I'm building websites. I can build relatively similar websites, and I might price for some people at $750, some people $7,500, others at $75,000. There are certain clients that you will attract within each one, regardless of their
That's right.
budget.
That's right.
Right? Because someone like Coca-Cola is not going to hire someone who says they build websites for $750.
Right. Or
Right?
7,500.
or probably even $7,500.
Yeah.
So, you immediately take yourself out of that market, which may be a good thing, right? But so you need to think about who it is you're trying to reach. If I'm trying to reach a higher level of client, I need to charge more.
That's right.
In order to convince them that I know what I'm doing and that I am the right fit for them. Now, at some point, you are out of the budget of certain clients, so you can't just say, well, I'll always have a high price then, because that way I'll always get the premium clients. Yes, you will, but you'll also price yourself out of the people who simply don't have the budget. But my point is simply that there are high-end and low-end bounds to your targeting, and you need to think about how your pricing presents within those.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point, and it's the same conversation I keep having with my girlfriend, who insists that nobody's going to pay more than $3,000 a month. The reason that you believe that is because you're working with micro businesses who can't afford to pay more than $3,000 a month. But if you elevate into a larger size business, now you're working with organizations that A, understand marketing and communications, B, understand the value, C, understand how to measure results and how to hold you accountable to the things that you say you're going to do, and B, D, are willing to pay more. So as you grow your agency, you may start out at $1,500 a month in a retainer, and then you move to 3, and then you move to 5, and you'll continue to grow. But I think it's really important to first understand how much it truly costs to do something, add your profit margin in, and then if you add a premium price on top of that, that's okay too. And then, to your point, use the reactions of your prospects to help you define and like tweak and evolve your pricing as you go.
Yeah, and we all do this in our own lives too, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Back when I used to drink wine regularly, there was no chance in hell I was going to buy a bottle of wine that was $5 or $10. It just it wasn't going to happen. And the truth is, and I know this from having done a short stint as a food and beverage writer, there's actually some pretty decent stuff in those cheaper price points. It's
right.
harder to find,
yeah,
but it does exist.
Yeah.
Just like there are actually some decent boxed wines out there. I never in a million years would have bought a boxed wine.
Nope.
But the reality is, and that's also different in other parts of the world, it is actually more common to have good wines that come in boxes and not just bottles. So, it's all the psychology of me as the customer. I'm just not going to do it at certain price points, and so people will perceive you in the same way. Now, one of the other big psychological things that tends to come up is the notion of the 3-option pricing. And I would say this is probably one of the most widely held beliefs, not just in agency pricing, but elsewhere, which is you should always give prospects 3 different prices, basically a low number, a high number, and then the number you want them to settle on in the middle. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the 3 pricing proposal.
We rarely do it. And I understand the psychology of it, but usually what we do is say, this is what we think you need based on our experience and what you've told us, and this is how much it costs. I have found in the past that doing the 3 prices allows them to sort of nitpick a little bit, and I don't want to be in that kind of business. That said, we do have a client who's a long-term client we've been working with for a really long time, and they had us do a new scope of work for some additional work a couple of weeks ago, and they asked for 3 prices, and I was like, okay. So we actually did the low price on what it actually cost, and then a medium and a high price. And they actually went with the high price, which I was actually super surprised by. That almost never happens, because you're right. Usually they go for the middle price. but I hardly ever do it, and it's mostly because most prospects, especially if they haven't worked with you before, will nitpick it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly does open up more debate around, what specific things cost.
Yeah.
And in general, I think that's not a healthy
Yep.
conversation.
Yep.
I think that you need to talk about what the package costs and not get into a place where you're breaking things out. So to the extent that you are providing three options, I would prefer to do it in such a way where there's no quantities involved, right? So it's not, at this price point, we'll do, 2 or 3 pitches a month and
Yeah.
2 blog posts. Because the more you put numbers in there, now it's opening the door for people to start doing their own mental math, which
Yep.
may or may not be correct.
Yep.
And say, well, what if I do 3
One,
blog posts
right.
and 2 pitches
Right,
and
right.
5 social media
Yes.
posts? Like,
Yes.
no.
No.
Because that is not, that's not the kind of menu that you should be offering. So I think that to the extent that you are providing options in order to fulfill the psychology of pricing that is so widely taught, they first of all need to be 3 viable options.
Yes.
You can't ever do it in such a way where either you're not profitable on the low end, or the low end can't produce results, or the high end is just kind of silly and you're not really going to be able to produce that many more results or that much more impact. Right? They need to be things that actually make sense on a standalone basis. So you can't, psychology is important, but you can't use it to make all of your decisions for you. And I'll also tell you, real world, I'm not convinced that for a lot of what agencies do, it really drives people to the middle option.
Yep.
I think that people are, and part of that is probably because agencies aren't doing a great job of constructing those 3 different options in order to really drive people in the right direction. But too often I see people take the low end price just because,
It's
I mean,
the low end
frankly,
price.
when you're first starting to work with someone,
Yeah.
you want as low a risk as possible
Sure.
in most cases. And so there's going to be a natural tendency to gravitate towards that low end. And so you need to be careful about this, because you might actually be driving people to the wrong option when
Absolutely.
you do it.
Absolutely.
So if you are going to do it, try it, see how it works, see what the reactions are. But if you are consistently driving to either the low or the high end and not to that middle option, you may need to reevaluate how you're structuring.
Yeah, I agree with you. I haven't had really great luck with them, and it does they do nitpick it. So
Yeah, I mean, and I think that there is a value to providing either one option or maybe 2 options, but they need to be, you need to do it in such a way that you are perceived as the expert.
yes.
And if I simply provide 3 options as everybody kind of expects you might, it now looks like I'm more of just a regular salesperson.
Yeah.
And you really are that expert advisor. I mean, if you go to the doctor, they might say, well, you could do this or you could do that. They very rarely say, so here are 3 options.
Here's the low end. Here's the high end.
Right. And so, I'm all for options when there actually are legitimate options and you can explain, separate and apart from the price of it, why someone should go with option A or option B. But to me, the pricing piece of option should be secondary and not primary.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so
Because they might
funny.
even be 2
'Cause
similarly priced options.
right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing you could do if it's a necessity is tie it to results. So instead of saying we're going to do this work, you can say, okay, for this amount of money, these are the results based on our experience that you can expect to get. This is how much it costs. For this price, these are the results you can expect to get. So, but you have to be really, really, really good at predicting outcomes. And so often, as we all know, that when we start working with a client, we really don't know, right? You've had a couple of conversations, you base a proposal on experience, you might know the industry really well, but you have no idea. You have no idea the ethics or the culture or the morals or the values or you just don't know. You don't know how they work. You don't know what works and what doesn't. You don't know what they're hiding from you, because there's always something. So I think it's really hard to predict that kind of stuff until you've been working with them for at least a year.
Yeah, I mean, I would be super cautious about being too specific with expected results, because as you say, you don't know enough about them culturally. You don't even know if they're going to be easy to work with so that they get you what you need
Right.
in order to succeed. I mean,
Right.
frankly, a lot of the times when agencies struggle, it's because they're not getting the feedback, the information, the other things that they need from clients. And we've talked a lot about that on this show in the past as well, about how to cajole clients into getting you what you need to succeed. But because, now you've created psychology in your pricing where you're making them almost expect failure,
Right.
when you're not able to hit the exact
produce.
numbers.
Yep.
And so, because you told them you can get these results, you may do something really well in another portion of what you were doing that really makes it, the engagement, worth the client's money. But because you started the conversation around specific results and numbers, if you don't hit those, the perception will be that you failed even when you didn't. So be
it's
really
super hard.
careful about thinking about not just the psychology at the sign-up stage, but the psychology over time as well, because that plays into how you price and how you retain clients as well.
Absolutely. And the last thing I will say is you're definitely not charging enough, so increase your prices.
There we go.
It's true.
So,
It's true.
so now that we've depressed everybody, speaking of psychology. All right. Well, on that note, we will wrap up this episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
I'm Ginny Dietrich.
And it depends.